In this lesson, we are going to learn about pipes. Pipes don't need to be complicated. You can think of them as a function that returns you something new. So let's assume that we have a function which takes a string. Now inside this function, because we've called it uppercase, we could do return string dot to uppercase. So when we pass a string into this function, it basically will return it. So we could do var name equals and then uppercase, and we could pass in Todd as a lowercase value. And if we did console.log name, this would then print out Todd. So you can think of a pipe as a data transformation mechanism. So it's pretty much just a function that Angular will run internally for you to do some kind of transformation on a data set or a single value. So here we're just using a single value. However, we've already covered ngFor, so you could actually use a pipe on an ngFor as well. So this is just a basic example of how you can use them in JavaScript, or the concept behind them in JavaScript, to start thinking about how we can use pipes. So in our component, what we're going to use is this example with the class.checkedIn, which means that we can remove all the passenger information that we don't want from the previous video. So now if we scroll down, we can see this red underline. This means that we are not conforming to our passenger interface. Now if we typed it to any, this would mean that we can type anything that we want. However, we want our passenger model to implement this interface. So we can just simply add checked in, which is either a number. So checked in date is going to be a timestamp to a specific date of when the user checked in. So if they are checked in, it's true. And if they are not checked in, they get a null value. So let's go ahead and up to our interface and create checked in date. It's either going to be a number or it's going to be null. And that's simply it. Now I'm assuming that we are actually returning checked in date as null from the server. It might be the case that your API actually does not return it, in which case TypeScript will then complain. In this instance, what you'll want to do is simply remove the null check here and put a question mark here. This makes it an optional property on the interface. So if it doesn't exist, it's absolutely fine. If it does exist, then it must conform to a number. So when we scroll back down, you can see that Rose is no longer red. However, when we remove this entire collection becomes red. And if we go back again, we can leave it as number or null, which means when we add the checked in date back in, this then conforms to all of the interfaces for this particular collection. So now that we've adopted our interface, we've done this for a particular reason because we are going to use some pipes against these dates. But what we're going to start with is something called a JSON pipe, which is really helpful for debugging. So this passenger object here, if we wanted to take a closer look, what we could do is create a p tag. Now inside this p tag, we can do passenger and then close this off. Now instead of passing a function, what we do is create a pipe operator. So you can see this operator here, and all we do is just tell it the name of the pipe here. And all we do is pass in the word JSON. So here we're telling Angular that we want to use the JSON pipe. So we'll go ahead and we'll test this out in the browser just to see what this gives us, because we are looking at the entire passenger object, not just the full name property. So you can see here that we're using the JSON pipe, and instead of object, which is what we saw earlier in one of the videos, we are actually converting our JavaScript object to JSON. So you can see the double quotes here are now valid JSON. Now what we'll do underneath this is actually create a div, and we'll give it a class called date. This is going to resemble when the passenger checked in. Now we are going to say check in date. So what we want to do is do passenger and then check in date. So this will actually give us the checked in date of that particular passenger. So each passenger is a particular date stamp. So Angular thankfully has a date pipe built in, which allows us to specify particular date formats. So for instance, if I just wanted the year, I can type Y. There are various combinations. So if you use a triple M, this will actually give you a short form. So this will essentially give you Sep instead of September, for example. Now, if we wanted it longer and we used 4, this would then just give you September. So check the documentation for all the types of syntaxes. The one that we're going to actually use is similar to this, but we're going to put D on the end, which stands for the day. So you can see that we have our JSON pipe being rendered out with the date timestamp. Now, because we've used a specific format, we're actually using March 29th, 2017. So you can see all the dates that are available have been printed out, and anyone with a red dot doesn't have a date. So we can go back and actually use a ternary expression to basically say that they're not checked in. So let's go ahead and build out another feature. So what we can do to make this a little bit more readable is bump it onto a new line. Now we can check via a ternary expression if the passenger is checked in. So we can do this question mark here. If the passenger is checked in, we can essentially wrap it in a brace like this. Otherwise, what we want to do is just simply put some text saying not checked in. So that's as simple as it gets. That's all we need to do. All we do here is check if it's available. If it's not available, it will actually become null. If the check-in date isn't available, it's going to display this text saying not checked in. Otherwise, it's going to wrap it and it's going to parse the date out for us. So let's save this out and we'll go back to the browser and take a look. So here we are, we can see check-in date March 29th and Rose is not checked in, and we have the words not checked in. One really nice feature about pipes is we can actually chain them. So Angular has a built-in pipe called uppercase. So what we can actually do is convert it to a date first, and then it will run the uppercase. If we switch them round, it would convert it to uppercase first, which means that it would actually throw an error because it cannot convert the number, which is a check-in date, to uppercase. So it needs to convert it to a date first, and then it will convert that result to an uppercase format. So we'll go ahead and check this out in the browser as the final demo for this video. And as you can see, for anyone who is checked in, they have an uppercase date. Hopefully this has been a good introduction to Angular pipes. You can check out the documentation on the website for the full list of pipes that are available. But this gives you an example of how to use them in a simple way, such as a JSON pipe. And the JSON pipe is great because it will actually update when you update your data. If we update a property on the passenger, this pipe will then actually update and print out the object in the DOM. So when you're doing debugging, this is actually very useful. We've learned how to create dates. Angular has a very powerful date formatter built in that we can mix and match, we can combine, we could do this and swap them round, and you can essentially compose your own dates. We've also learned how to chain a pipe, and we're again using a complex ternary expression here just to show a result if the passenger is not checked in. So this gives you an overview of the power of the expressions and the pipes all in one.